Hello and welcome to this trip plan for a family-friendly outing down in the eastern Alaska Range. This trip plan will run you through an itinerary, and in addition it will have maps, logistics and gear lists, and a discussion of some of the possible hazards for this trip down to the Alaska Range. There are many possible itineraries for going down to this area. This was put together with the thought process of potentially if you're lucky enough to get a 3-day weekend and you want to get away down to the mountains with your family. The itinerary starts out with a drive down to the eastern Alaska Range. So it's going to be down the Richardson Highway. It's about a 3.5 hour drive, sometimes a little longer if you have kiddos. A stop at the IGA grocery store in Delta Junction is a great way to sort of break that up on the way down. First day heading down and going to the Red Rock Canyon Road, just past Miller Creek on the Richardson Highway, and driving in the Red Rock Canyon Road for a couple of miles until you find a nice little open spot to set up camp. From there, a nice day hike up the Red Rock Canyon Road is super rewarding and beautiful. The next day, maybe leaving the camp just for the logistics of not having to set it up and driving to the Gulkana Glacier Road. From there, driving in the Gulkana Glacier Road as far as you're comfortable or your vehicle will allow, and hiking up onto the Gulkana Glacier proper is a beautiful long day trip that's really fun and enjoyable for the whole family. And then coming back and camping at your comfortable car camp set up at the Red Rocks Canyon Road. And then maybe the final day doing a half-day hike up Fossil Creek to a beautiful pass, great place to have lunch, and then heading back down and bringing your crew back to Fairbanks, possibly stopping at the Buffalo Diner in Delta for a burger on the way home. So as you're heading down and looking for the Red Rock Canyon Road, it's located at mile 213 of the Richardson Highway. The entrance to the road is at a gravel pit on the left or east side of the road heading south, and you basically drive this road in and it takes you around through a fairly deep canyon that has some red rocks towards the end of it, which are very distinctive features and beautiful as well. The road is not maintained, so you're going to need to have some kind of vehicle with at least a little clearance. Generally speaking, Subarus, small trucks, things like that are totally appropriate. I wouldn't take a little teeny low clearance car maybe back on this road, depending on the year. After a few miles, the road turns from a lower or higher quality road to more of a ATV trail. So it definitely turns more into a trail. The trickiest part of the hike for most people as they head out the Red Rock Canyon Road is going to be the creek crossing, which comes basically as the trail has dwindled down to more of a Jeep trail or four-wheeler trail, and there's a creek crossing. Obviously, as with most creek crossing, the depth and volume of that creek can vary quite a bit depending on the recent weather, the snow melt, things like that. So that can be tricky and definitely needs to be assessed. Very unlikely to make it across in any season with totally dry feet. So usually it's a calf or a mid-shin deep creek crossing that gets everyone's feet wet. From there, there's the one significant climb of the hike, and it climbs up onto the lateral moraine feature on the southern part of the Canwell Glacier. So after that climb, it's fairly level as it travels along that moraine feature all the way out to a glacier that comes in from the south into the valley of the Canwell Glacier. And at this point, it becomes much more of a mountain route and less of a trail hike. So a lot of folks will take a look around, enjoy the beauty up there, and then turn around and head back for their camp. Here's an overview map of the Red Rock Canyon Road, and you can see that as it curves in there, there's a couple spots where before it makes its big curve along the Canwell Glacier that are generally pretty good camping back in there, kind of cleared little areas. And then you can also see where the creek crossing is. At the creek crossing, there's also another trail that goes up the creek valley, which would also be a great day hike. But the more dramatic views of the Institute and the upper Camel Glacier are found by following that lateral moraine of the glacier as it heads up and along that feature. Here's a picture along that feature. This is a small little trail that runs just along the north side of the four-wheeler trail. This great place in the fall, whether it's late July, early August, to go pick some blueberries and enjoy some of our late summer days up in that area. This is a topo map view of this area as well. You can tell it's very similar to the satellite type image, but it does show how big the Camel Glacier is, and it does show that glacier coming in from the south that sort of cuts off the road that goes along the moraine, or the trail along the moraine. So on the second day of this itinerary, it's great to head a little further south. You're going to be heading down to mile 197 of the Richardson Highway, just past the Richardson Monument. After you've crested Isabel Pass, you'll see a pipeline access road that goes off to the east, or the left side of the road. This pipeline access is pretty well maintained for the first mile or two, and then deteriorates into more of a jeep trail. Has a couple potential small creek crossings depending on the direction of the water that particular year. And the vehicle access ends after about 4 miles. There's a nice big turnaround out there if you want to take your vehicle that far. In good conditions, I've made it as far out there with a Subaru, but some years it would take more of a 4x truck or a Jeep to get back into that area, depending on what's going on with the water levels and the trail. The trail begins, so if you can't drive all the way in there, you can just park your car off of the road and walk that short portion, the mile or two, back to where the end of the vehicle access is. At that point, it's not very far, just a couple hundred yards to the dramatic suspension bridge over College Creek, which allows you to get across that. And then you follow a clear, well-maintained trail up and over a little rise and down into the creek valley that comes off of the toe of the Gulkana Glacier. You follow along. You're typically on that kind of southeast side of the creek as you head in, and there's a couple different options once you get there. The first one is to continue along that side of the creek valley until you get to where the West Fork branch of the river has come in, and the river coming off the glacier has braided out. At that point, you can decide if you want to cross. If you don't want to cross there, you can give it a try to continue to follow that side of the creek that you're on further up. And depending upon the year, there have been years where you can weave your way up onto the glacial ice without having to cross the creek. It's it's one way or the another. Year to year, it varies quite a bit. A couple other variables to look at is trying to get to the ice of the glacier. That's kind of the tongue of ice that's furthest down and can get you onto the bare ice the quickest. Once you do get to the bare ice of the glacier, you'll want to put on some crampons. Strap-on crampons work great, even if it's just over running shoes or hiking boots. Just making sure you have some grip on that bare glacial ice. If there's still snow or snow patches, that's a good time to maybe turn around. Except for technical mountaineers, traveling on snow on an active glacier is something that takes experience mountaineering and potentially roping up in those situations. Whereas when you're on bare ice of a glacier, all the hazards are exposed, and so you can actively avoid those hazards just by choosing your route appropriately, wearing crampons so you don't slip and things like that. Here's a map that shows going into the Gulkana Glacier. The solid black line is the road that's pretty darn well maintained and pretty much most vehicles could make back. The dotted line is where things get a little bit more difficult as far as the driving and the vehicle access. Again, could easily be hiked. And then the red line shows the approximate route of getting up to the bare ice and then traveling up the bare ice a ways to get some wonderful views and whatnot up on the glacier. This is a picture of the suspension bridge across College Creek, which really allows you to get back in there and access this area. This suspension bridge is overall fairly straightforward. Certainly could be a little bit headier for people who have difficulty with heights or with small children who you're more concerned about. So here's a few pieces of advice for the glacier hike. So to start with, the weather at the Gulkana Glacier can be very cold and wet and windy. If there's poor weather in the area, it's almost always over the Gulkana Glacier. Due to the pictures you've seen in here and a couple more I have coming, you'll see that it can also be beautiful bluebird out there, but you need to be prepared for it to change quickly and to not be as pleasant as you'd like. Generally speaking, the bare ice on the right side of the glacier looking up provides the best pathway for people to be able to get up onto the ice and gain some views and enjoy that area. Just to mention again, that thick, sticky gray mud in the space between the valley floor and the bare ice can be one of the big bummers or hazards of getting up onto the glacier. It can be really hard to deal with. When you do get onto the glacial ice, there are moulins, which are holes in the glacier. There are little running streams on the glacier. There are cracks. There are various other ice features and whatnot. And all of these things, when the ice is bare, are visible, so they're all avoidable. And so that's the key to not getting yourself in trouble with those features, is just not getting close to them. It's really tempting to want to go stick your head down a hole like a moulin, but that hole could go 400 feet straight down to the heart of the glacier, and if you accidentally went in there, that would probably be the last you were heard of. So there are something to be cautious of and just stay away from when you're up there. If it's raining and storming when you're out there, be aware that if you do cross the creek can swell a huge amount. I've crossed it and then had it be raining and come back 2 hours later and had it go up a full foot and be almost impassable to get back over. Also, the moraine feature that is on the southeast side of the valley that you're hiking up is basically a bunch of dirt and mud over ice. And so during rainstorms, you'll get huge mudslides and huge rocks coming down that. So it's not a place you want to be during a storm, and something you want to be aware of as a hazard, as even as in dry weather as you hike up there, that potentially things could release from that southeast wall of the canyon. Unfortunately, that also tends to be one of the routes that sometimes can get you onto the glacier with the least amount of hassle. So it's weighing the risk of that falling debris versus the going across the creek or another access point to the glacier. This is a topo map of the Gulkana Glacier area, and one interesting thing to note is this was last updated in the 70s, and the glacier in this map is actually a mile further out down the creek valley than the more current satellite type images of this area. So the glacier's retreated almost a full mile in the last 40 or 50 years. So the topo maps, while helpful, are not super reliable in their detail about where the glacier starts. This is a picture of a cave that provided access to the glacier for a couple of years on that right-hand side as you approached the glacier. Big, beautiful cave, but as things changed, this cave collapsed and no longer exists. So that's one of the dilemmas with trying to provide route information is things change so rapidly up there that year to year things are a little bit different. So if you've left your camp at Red Rock Canyon Road after your great day up on the Gulkana Glacier, you head back to your vehicle and you drive back to your camp. The next morning, you can pack up your stuff, and if you're up for one more day hike, there's a beautiful little day hike off of Fossil Creek. Fossil Creek's a small creek that flows out of the mountains on the south side of Rainbow Ridge. So it's just at the end of Rainbow Ridge when the road makes a dramatic turn there. So you've driven by that big, beautiful scree slope, and the road turns, and on your left there's a very distinct gravel pit and a creek that's coming down in there. This creek has a trail that goes along its north side for a good solid mile of really good trail going up. So most of the time I'd recommend parking in the gravel parking lot, walking the road or the shoulder of the road back to cross the creek, cross Fossil Creek, and head up that north side trail, which is a distinct like four-wheeler, good quality trail for quite a while up there. Fossil Creek is a little hard to find in the sense it doesn't have a name on maps. It's kind of a local name for this particular area. People alpine tour ski up in there, hike, hunt, different various things up this valley. But it provides access to a high, beautiful mountain meadow with big mountains all around you, looking out over glaciers and seeing some of the bigger peaks up there. So after 1 mile, this hike basically turns into following the creek valley. Sometimes you have to do a little crossing back and forth over the creek, and so a little bit of exploration and whatnot. But overall, the creek valley becomes fairly free of brush, and so it allows for pretty good access up into this mountain region. As you get closer to the top, the hiking gets better and better until it opens out into a nice, smooth, low angle saddle that divides between McCallum Creek and the Richardson Highway there. Most people, this would be a great spot to have lunch. It's a little over 2 miles in, enjoy the views, take some pictures, and then decide to reverse course and go back to your car. Some people do adventure further over and go down into McCallum Creek. Another beautiful valley. There's caribou back in there. It's a great place to be, but the descent into McCallum Creek is definitely steeper and brushier. There are also people who are interested in things like pack rafting out, so they might hike up and over this saddle and pack raft out McCallum Creek back to the highway. This is a topo map of the route going up that creek. You can see on the upper part of the map is the end of Rainbow Basin. Be careful, there is one kind of valley right at the turn that's not the lower grade Fossil Creek Valley with the trail up it. That is just after the turn, just next to that gravel pit there. It heads up, and you can see that route that runs to about 2 miles up and leaves you in that high country looking down into McCallum Creek Valley. So after you've finished your day hike up the Fossil Creek Valley, packing up and bringing your crew back to the Fairbanks area. Again, the Buffalo Diner is a great stop for an early dinner on the way home. As a part of this presentation, I've got a general gear list here. Again, a lot of this stuff isn't mandatory. Camping gear, you might have some preferences or whatnot. I love lists to help me remind me of all the different little things that I need to think about before I go out. So certainly you can modify these lists and in whichever way you would like. I find that with the car camping experience, I'm bringing more stuff, more comfortable stuff. It's easily accessible. I'm packing my stuff up and using my vehicle as my bear-proof container. Sometimes I might have a cooler that I could put locks on or have some bear barrels and stuff, but the vehicle also helps with that capacity. You've got your cooking gear, for your group, and you can read through and take a look at these various items. A hard copy of the gear lists and the maps are available through a link on the OA Outdoor Adventures website. This is a list of some general hiking gear and clothing. Again, there aren't a huge number of specifics like 3 pairs of socks, this and that, but it gives you a feel for some of the stuff just to make sure that you don't forget. I'd like to highlight a couple things that I think are important for this series of adventures. First one is going to be some strap-on crampons. These are going to be pretty important as far as enjoying your experience up on the glacier if you want to go up on the ice. If you don't go on the ice, just hike up to the glacier, then they're not necessary. Bear spray for all the adults and people, older children who might be able to handle that. This is definitely wilderness. It's definitely bear country. People see bears fairly frequently there, or moose. And it's great to have some options. You know, a lot of times we're using group size and whatnot to mitigate things, but it's really nice to have an option like that if there was a close encounter with wildlife. Large group first aid kit, communication device. The cell phone reception there is marginal if existing at all. So possibly something like a satellite communicator, like an inReach or satellite phone, would be a great option to have if something weren't to go right. And then some of the safety things like navigation devices, extra clothing, things to keep your stuff dry, like little dry bag stuff sacks and whatnot, are all going to be an important part of your kit. You can check this list out. So this is a list of some hazards that exist. This isn't all inclusive, this isn't all the hazards, but some of the things I think about wildlife. So again, we're out in the wilderness. The potential for bear encounters or moose encounters is definitely there. Having a plan in place, using your group size to help mitigate the hazards, and having some options if you were to have a close encounter with wildlife, like a bear spray or potentially a firearm if you're comfortable with that. Mountain weather is going to be another big hazard. The weather can change very quickly, and it can be really epic out there as far as wind and rain and snow, pretty much in any season of the year. So it's something that you need to be prepared for those changes in weather and for what's happening, both by looking at forecasts ahead of time, but then being prepared in the field. The stream crossings, there's a couple different hikes that have stream crossings, and they can be anything from ankle deep, kind of benign little walk across to, raging, thigh deep, deadly waterways, depending on the season, the rainfall, the snow melt. So it's something where you're going to have your plans be flexible and take those things into consideration when you're out. Slips, trips, and falls are always something to be concerned about when you're out hiking on trails or off trails. Things like careful, attentive walking, using good soled shoes that have tread that's appropriate for what you're doing, and using trekking poles and good route finding are all important aspects of sort of preventing some of those slips, trips, and falls. And then you've got the glacier hazards, and I think avoidance is really the best tool for avoiding those hazards. So that's not going close to the holes, not going into the glacial streams, not jumping across crevasses that are big enough to fall into, and generally avoiding the hazards that you have out there. The other big hazard is it will potentially could be either continuous snow or patchy snow fields that might still exist up on the bare ice, and those would be something that could hide a hazard underneath. So generally speaking, unless you're a mountaineer and roped up, you avoid those areas as well. So like I mentioned, there are lots of variations to this trip. You could easily camp at Red Rock Canyon Road the first night, move your camp to Gulkana Glacier, pack your camp up. You could do things like that. Some other options if you're into canoeing, You've got Fielding Lake right there, a canoe out across Fielding Lake, maybe with some fishing, maybe some hiking up onto the ridges surrounding Fielding Lake is another great day trip in this area. Hiking out the Kasner Glacier Valley, whether it's to try to get into the or check out the ice caves that are about a mile in, or go further up the moraine features up the Kasner Glacier. There's kind of endless adventures out there. And this is just a put together itinerary for three of my favorite adventures out in that particular area during the summer. And I tend to go towards late summer. So for this particular trip series, I think anytime really from solstice to the end of August would be generally appropriate, but I might kind of lean towards mid to late July. Try to find some berries and enjoy maybe the beginning of the fall color changes that are happening down there. So I hope this presentation gave you some ideas for getting out and enjoying that particular area. If you have any questions, you can contact me at Outdoor Adventures or via either email or on the telephone. If you need some of the gear to get out and enjoy these adventures, Outdoor Adventures has tents, stoves, dry bags. We have a fair number of strap-on crampons. We have bear-resistant containers, backpacks, things like that that can help you get out. Trekking poles can get out and enjoy the kind of trips that I've shown during this presentation. Thank you and have a great day.